Hello, everybody. We're at episode 10 of Blueprint for Closes. My name is Dominic Ciccarelli with my co-host Rob Nixon. Today we have Stone Capital investors Frank Rizzo, Eric Busuttil. Thank you for coming, guys.
Thanks for having us.
How's it going, Dom?
Everything is great, man. Today is a super exciting episode because we're going to talk about a niche real estate investment category, which is MHPs or mobile home parks. I've been hearing a lot about the space recently, not only through you guys, but through a few other friends of mine. Before we get into it too much, why don't you guys talk about, where you came from and what you did and how you guys know each other?
Got it. Well, my name's Frank Rizzo. Thank you for having us. Thank you, Rob, for having us being part of the program. I guess my experience in getting into the mobile home park space is, typical. When you grow up in Brooklyn, I guess, and you're in real estate, eventually you end up in mobile home parks. That's kind of a traditional story. But I've been involved in real estate for about 22, 23 years now. My first exposure to the space was 12 years ago, almost by accident. I was working with a family in New York who owned a slew of apartments in downtown Brooklyn, in Crown Heights, in East Flatbush. And it was just a, traditional American success story. First generation immigrant. They came here to this country. Father was an entrepreneur, and he just took his money and bought multifamily. And then over time, he just amassed a nice small portfolio of, multifamily housing. And then when 2007, 2008 came along, he found himself in a lot of trouble. He had almost 100% occupancy and 45% credit loss and debt, across his portfolio. And so, we started with kind of coming up with a plan to kind of get him out of that situation, exiting some of the properties. And then when we got to the final, 20 unit apartment building that we had to sell, they needed to kind of supplement that income. And the family had moved down to North Carolina, and just working with them in trying to find another asset was how I found the mobile home park space.
Mm-hmm. Eric?
Thanks a lot for having me, Dom and Rob. So I started in mortgages when I was about 20 years old. Always worked for myself since day one. Did very well subprime days, and then went through that market. We all seen a downturn. I ended up coming back into that. Had my own company for a while. Managed some mortgage branches. I still do commercial mortgages somewhat. Always being in, the real estate mortgage world, I always knew I had to get out of the transactional aspect of that business. I looked at others that were successful, and, they were investing in real estate. So I knew early on, especially being from Brooklyn, my family has real estate, and, anybody that I looked up to that was successful, they were in real estate.
Yeah.
So like everyone, I wanted to get into real estate. I bought a few 2-families. I own some real estate still in New York. Fast forward probably to about 10 years ago, Frank and I linked up, through, transactional business. He had the same thoughts that I did and plans that I did. And he was also, investing in, 1 and 2 families, some flips, some buy and holds. And, being in New York, you see a lot of change that has happened over the last years. So we started talking, we started meeting regularly, thinking about different things to do. And I think we both at the same time kind of came to terms with we didn't want to be only investing in New York. And that was a tough thing to do,
Yeah.
right? Because, New York is a great place. Obviously, it's where I live, where I come from. So we started, looking at other assets. We started by doing, some projects in New York for a while. We did a handful of, flips, renovations. We bought a hotel together in Pennsylvania. Got out of that one by the skin of our teeth. Good story there. We can tell you about sometime. And
we did own a lot of heart-shaped tubs that I think.
Really?
So we actually one of the first deals that we did, we purchased Penn Hills, and it's a historical spot in.
Well, if you're a swinger, right? It's a historic.
In how?
In
Pennsylvania, Harrisburg.
Oh,
no,
okay.
in the Poconos, East Stroudsburg.
East Stroudsburg.
Yeah. And it was
close to the Poconos.
and it was
wasn't in the
it was
Poconos.
a swingers. It was
It
known.
was beautiful. It was 80 acres. I mean, this thing had everything. It had 100 hotel units. It had a 30,000 square foot entertainment center.
What was driving you to buy it? What was the interest?
Just a good deal.
Value add or
We were going to try to redevelop it.
We bought it out of they call it repository. It was like a tax sale, so we bought it out of repository, and it's just you could not replace it for the price we paid for it, and we just said this was too good of an opportunity to pass up, and we did sit down with the county beforehand and just kind of went through with a plan, and this is what we were looking to do.
Politics were very involved there, and we were very early stages in our careers, and we basically got pushed out of that deal.
Well,
you bought it, you closed it. How long did you manage it for?
Well, so we bought it, we closed it, and we had a plan that we were executing on it. So probably about 7 months into the plan, we actually had a Japanese fusion restaurant that wanted to take over the old restaurant space, and we were negotiating a lease there while we were still looking to get the infrastructure upgraded and put in place. So there was a new county administrator that took up. Basically, when we underwrote the deal, we understood where the taxes were supposed to go based off the rate. So we assessed like a $16,000 a year
increase
for taxes on the property,
as it was,
based off of what we paid, right? So by June, we're negotiating to get the
and we've done a lot of work there.
Yeah, and we had done some work, right? And we were negotiating to get the restaurant activated. In July, we get a tax bill, right, that moves our tax bill to $180,000 a year from where we expected it to be $16,000. And I take a step back and I'm like,
something's wrong.
Something is completely off. So I call up the county, and I was dealing with somebody there. I was like, well, you can appeal it. You do. So we hire an appraiser. We hire, an attorney. We go in and we go to appeal. We present all our evidence. County has nothing. Right? County has nothing. And there was a new tax administrator there, and she said she was going to go off of, instead of what was customary, like throughout the country, is like, we'll go off the last sale price. She was like, well, we're going to go off for the last time that the hotel was active, which was 8 years ago, and they gave it a $3 million valuation. I was like, wow, this property's not worth $3 million right now. We go in, we fight it. They send us a letter in the mail. Congratulations, you won on appeal. $90,000 is the taxes.
Wow.
So
now it was never a working hotel since you bought it.
It wasn't a working hotel.
Right, you were still getting it up and running. Wow.
So now we go to sue the city. Right? There's nothing to do. Project has to stop. Everything stops. We go to sue the city the day before we go to trial. So now it's another 6 months. It's like February the next year, the day before trial. She settles with us for $17,000.
Wow.
So you might as well just ask us for the $1,000 we would have paid you and just been done with it.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So you got out of the deal after.
We just done.
Yeah. We
were left with a bad taste.
Well, it was a W. It was a W at the end of the day.
You ended up finishing the project, getting rented?
No, we were just so turned off by the county that we just said, hey, look, let's just go. And we exited at a nice price. People were coming in there. They wanted to do it. And we gave it to somebody else who stepped in, and we just said, well, let's move on to something else.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
So let's pull it back, right? So the whole essence of why we started this podcast and what we've been trying to basically put together is it's all centered around real estate, and just there's so many assets of real estate. The first part was really about building a team, legal, insurance, so many different aspects there, mortgages, etc. Now we get into asset classes, right? And so many people are trying to get out of New York. You guys have found a really unique niche. So if I may fast forward for a second, Stone Capital has how many units roughly, whether you've owned and operated collectively?
So collectively, we've been in and out of 20 communities, probably about 1,500 lots in total in those 20 communities. Put us in the top 100 operators nationwide in terms of size. Right now, last year where we saw the market, there were some assets that we just basically hit our end game in terms of where our underwriting was, and we exited, and now we're currently looking at other opportunities.
So we exited a handful of properties over the last few years.
So top 100 operators in the country?
In the country.
spectacular.
Yeah.
Now, how many years have you been in the business?
About 8 years now.
That's tremendous.
Yeah. How did you fall into mobile home?
Purely by accident. I mean, by looking for that family and working with them originally, that's what gave me my first exposure. And when they were looking to move out of state, they wanted me to represent them on finding something that was going to represent that supplement that income. So when I went to the father and I said, look, the best yielding assets I find are these mobile home parks, and I knew nothing about mobile home parks. He said, Frank, I'll only do it if you stay in the deal with us.
Wow.
So you have to run the deal. And we did. And so, I was successful, and the family was happy. And after a few years, they kind of took over. I took a step back, and the market here took up. It was right after Sandy, the market here picked up. And then you kind of work on the low hanging fruit, right? So things here were kind of moving again. And then, like as Eric mentioned before, we sat down and we said, hey, we want to do something. We knew New York wasn't the spot for us, just in terms of where we saw things going legislatively, what we thought values were.
Yeah.
And we were looking for another place to move capital. And I, mentioned to Eric, I'd been involved in a mobile home park before. So why don't we do why don't we take a ride down to, Georgia, Alabama, take a look at some sites. And we just started, exploring, trying to find deals.
So you find your first park, you go down there. What's that like?
So it wasn't until I would say park 3 where I was comfortable. The first park was 17 hours away if you drove. And we drove quite a few times when we first bought that property. And we got a lot done on the drives. We talked. I don't know how many other times you get a chance to sit and talk with your partner for 17 hours about things going on. And it was very useful. First park, hands in the air. We bought it. Can't believe we bought it. We hired a property manager. We thought that was what we were going to do, right? Big mistake. Not knowing the space as well as we do now. And park manager just couldn't handle us because nothing was getting done and we were on top of them. We took it into our own hands. We started self-managing that property. It started to do well right around the time we bought our second park, which was another, it was probably a 1-star park, our second park. And it was,
If that.
it was 10 times the size as the first park. The first park was 31 units. Second park was 98 units, 30 acres, Georgia, hour and a half from Atlanta.
And I understand it was 5 times worse than the first park.
It was 5 times worse than the first park. And I just remember the second time I probably was even more frustrated. I was just remember in the middle of the park, hands in the air. What did we do? I can't believe we did this.
I was like, don't worry about it. It'll be fine.
And, we only bought the land. We bought the land in foreclosure. The units on the property were owned by the prior owner.
Who lost
there was
the property in foreclosure.
28, I don't want to say tenants, maybe squatters were half of them in the park. And it was just, the worst picture that you have in your mind of a mobile home park. This was it, right? Just everything's were overgrown. There was a fence around the playground that was 12 feet tall with vines around it. It looked like a prison yard. And, that was our, we turned that park around, both of those parks around, took us a couple years. A lot of stories to tell. On top of the fact of everybody thought we were crazy.
Right.
Yes.
I can't even tell you. Again, probably till later on, just, I can't believe you're buying a mobile home park in Alabama and in Georgia. And we just kept going. And, this is where we are now.
So again, super unique asset class, right? So I'm just thinking in my head, a multifamily building, maybe you have delinquencies, maybe you have vacancies. I wouldn't even know what happens. Like, where is your value add typically? So there's land and there's the actual trailers, homes, right? So how does that typically work? Because I've always heard that a question, like, do you own the land? Do you own the trailers?
So
or homes, rather?
So you can get a mix, right? So sometimes you'll own the homes, but we always own the land. Sometimes you own some of the homes, sometimes you'll own all of the homes, whatever you acquire in that transaction. Our model is we don't want to own the homes. We find it better when residents own the homes and then we own the land, and then we can focus on what we're good at, which is, the beautification, the safety, the security, the infrastructure, focus on that, right? Because that's something that we can operate from remotely. And then when residents own that home, they will take
Ownership
care of,
mentality.
they have an ownership mentality. They'll take better care of not only of their home and their lot, but they'll have a better eye in the community. And the difference that I found in this sector than from other sectors in real estate is that the mentality, or the people have a sense of community when they're there, right? So if I own a home in that community, you'll find people, they're vested, right? The average mobile home owner will stay in a community 17 and a half years.
And not to interrupt, Frank, but one of the most satisfying things for me is not just being a landlord and turning these communities around, but we change people's lives typically. Sure. Because in some of these communities, all of these communities, especially when they're renters there, people have been renting for a while, really don't have the opportunity to own. And, we take the time, and it's a process, in changing the way people look at things and bringing them towards the steps of home ownership. And, we have probably, I would say, I looked at our organizational chart the other day, we have probably about 45 full-time employees. I would say 70% of them are on-site people, 60% of them are on-site people. A lot of our employees live in our communities. These are people who were renters, didn't work for us. We gave them a job. We taught them the business. And we have people that first property that we bought, we sold that property. We moved her home to another property, and she's still working with us today. And we have a few stories like that where families have been working for us for a while, and we teach them the culture, and it's very satisfying.
So the idea is, you own the land, you have these lots. Now, whether they own the house or not, let's put it aside for a second. But your job is to make sure it's safe, make sure it's clean, provide water, provide some type of waste, electric.
So it's community development 101, right? And you've been involved in community development and trying to, revitalize, a section of, say, Staten Island, and what kind of boulder you're trying to lift over, up a hill when you're trying to do that with different agencies and whatever the case may be. And here, you've kind of got a clearer path, right? If you want to recycle that community or revitalize that community, when you have that game plan in place, you're able to execute, and that's where you're creating that change, and you're taking that 1-star community and you're turning it into a 3 or 4-star community where all of a sudden there's that pride of ownership. There's that need inside the larger community that now wants to be there and be part of what you're doing there, because it really is its own ecosystem, right? You own a park, it's its own ecosystem and has its own culture.
So value add, right? So I imagine it's a mix of a couple things, right? So expense, you probably tighten expenses right now. Do you clean these places up, and then so people pay, I guess, a monthly fee for their lot, right? So once you reposition these, typically the price goes up a bit.
The price goes up a bit. I mean, the most important thing, and that we do, and Eric will back this up, is changing the culture, right? So if you have a community where the former owner did not, that wasn't really an operator, but just, usually we find people multi-generational, they're just pulling the money out, they're not putting it back in. Changing that culture and having people realize that, like, hey, we're looking to make this a desirable place to live, not some place that's just you're kind of stuck there. People enjoy that and they appreciate that.
And is there so when you buy these parks, right, is there typically because I have literally no idea, you buy a piece of land that is a park, is there a certain amount of lots that you're permitted to homes to put on it? Like, is there a zoning clause for that? How does that work?
So a lot of these communities, all of these communities were kind of evolved into communities. A lot of them, not all of them were planned communities where they went to the city and they're like, hey, we want to put a mobile home community here. It's, a farmer who's got, a handful of children, his kids work the land. Before you know it, he buys a home for his son, a home for his daughter. Next thing you know, he's got 10 homes. Before you know it, he's got a piece of land, and he develops that out over time. And then at some point along that way, the city will typically, give them, some sort of a, document stating how many units are here, right? In a lot of the communities that we've purchased, and because these properties evolve into what they are, a lot of times they're not laid out the way they would be if you planned to lay them out. So we'll come in there, we'll look at it for what it is, and we'll see where we could expand. And, you know, when we're in these communities and these towns and they see what we're doing, they're very helpful and they allow things, right? So we'll be able to add lots a lot of times, especially if they know that you're, you know, bettering the community.
Responsible owner.
Right.
Sure. That's it. That's interesting.
Now, can you create a new mobile home park today?
So,
Or is this something that's like a grandfather type use?
So one of the interesting things about the space, which there hasn't been a lot of new mobile home parks built nationwide, right? So we have an affordable housing issue. Manufactured housing is the most affordable housing stock that you have. But because of the size of the land that it takes up, because it's basically horizontal multifamily, there's not a lot of new mobile home parks that are being built year in and year out. And like up until recently, it was probably about 10 or 12 a year, right? That are being nationwide.
Wow.
Right. So, you know, because you go to the major cities, it's easier to say, I'm going to just take this land and I'm going to make multifamily house,
right.
you know, do multifamily housing.
Mm.
Now we're starting to see in certain towns where they're looking for that type of development. We happen to like expansion, so like we'll look at assets where maybe we find a community and there's a lot of undeveloped land there. So now it's kind of a
conversation.
creative, it's a conversation where we know that we already have a existing stream of income or existing residents. We can work on that infill project, and then we can kind of expand over time as we see the market develops.
Right.
So that's been one of the things that we've looked at and that's helped us kind of as we've evolved.
As being someone not in the space, is like an RV considered a trailer, or is RV parking like a different type of animal?
Just to give you a visual, Dom, and a lot of people have this question, and until I open my phone and show them a picture, sometimes they don't fully understand what it is. But a manufactured home is typically a single wide or a double wide. A single wide's, 16 feet wide by, 60 to 80 feet long. It comes in on a truck.
How deep?
16 feet wide by 60 to 80 feet
Oh,
long.
wow.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
Way
It comes
bigger
in
than I
on
thought.
a tractor trailer. It gets dropped. Then it gets set on block, strapped down to the ground. The wheels come out, and then
Some type of skirting.
some type of skirting or foundation will go around it, and it'll stay there. So it's a home. It stays there. An RV, and we've recently acquired 2 communities that have RV components. It's different, right? But RVs pull in, pull out. But now you're seeing a lot of long-term RVers, which is why it has become more attractive for us. And we wouldn't have bought these communities if they were only RV parks, although we've seen some communities come across our way and we tried to. But the last 2 communities that we bought, one of them was originally an RV park, turned into a mobile home community, has some RV lots there. So we took it on, and we're currently developing a property, redeveloping or reconfiguring and redeveloping 2 properties that are RV/mobile home communities.
You can live in an RV full time?
Yeah.
People do.
Wow.
People do.
So the common theme that I see constantly is just being master operators, right? You guys have found a really unique space, and you guys are clearly just incredible managers of these actual parks. And I think that that's really what differentiates.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be hands-on, and I've heard countless stories from you guys of going down there and working these parks, nonstop. So at some point, whether it was the first deal or, a couple deals in, you guys started raising money for these deals and let some investors participate, right?
Correct.
So now, for example, I don't know if you have any deals lined up or you're putting things together. I imagine accredited investors, right? What does that look like? What kind of returns do you target?
So
Investment.
when we underwrite all of our deals, we look at it from 2 ways. We have we schedule out a 5-year plan for it. We want to make sure that our partners on it are going to see 20% or better returns annualized by the time we have an exit. We usually plan for, a couple of different exits, whether it's through a refinance or recapitalization or a complete exit of the property down the road. So we always take that approach. We take a, super conservative approach in terms of how we're outlaying our plan. And, 24 months to really get it stabilized. You got to go in, you've got to change the culture, you've got to change the community, you got to make your infrastructure improvements, and then you've got to have a plan for your legacy residents that want to stay there, right? And you don't want to kind of create any sort of payment shock, but also make it attractive for new people who are willing to come in and pay market rates, because they're coming in there, and we already know that we're maybe under market for what's currently in the surrounding area, and how we can kind of attract new residents or new potential homeowners to our community. So we do take a very thorough look, through the diligence, to make sure that we're, essentially, whenever you make money in real estate, it's because you bought right. And we've been fortunate on our exits that we've been able to successfully, and all of our exits, return to our partners in excess of 20%, which we think is super key. And, we do look for partners who, listen, from time to time, this is an asset class that affordable housing, that there's a need. It's super recession resistant, and we're the most affordable housing stock. So if we provide our partners an opportunity to get into that space, but knowing that they have an operator who's, been in the trenches, understands the market, and can deal with different elements.
And what are investments typically like, minimum and typical?
It varies. I mean, obviously we have minimum investments per deal. Usually people invest, and we've had people coming from different sizes, from 50,000 to 7 figures. It really depends on the individual, their capacity, and obviously their accreditation, to
Awesome.
be involved in that.
Great.
You have 1,200 units now.
Correct.
1,200 lots. You have a goal where you want to be to manage?
We want to get to about 5,000 units over the next, I would say, 7 years.
Okay.
That's our goal.
And you said you're number one, within the top 100.
Correct.
I mean, what are these top 10 guys? I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of units. How many trailer parks exist?
So there's
Great question.
44,000 communities that exist nationwide. That number is kind of dwindling because some of these parks end up getting closed down. The top player in the space is Equity Lifestyle. Sam Zell owned 176,000 lots.
Oh, wow.
So they were number one. Sun Communities is
He's
another
a
one.
beast.
Yeah, and we've seen in the last few years, like the last 3 years, 4 years. I mean, as people were chasing yield, we've seen a lot of new entrants into the space.
Are you seeing them out yet?
I think just across the board for real estate investors who came in the last few years, if you don't have a solid operation, and you when rates reset, I think people are going to get there's going to be some challenges.
I mean, this is not a space, in my opinion, right? And I think that anybody looking to invest and get some respectable returns, these guys are clearly ones to do it with. This is not a space you just step in. I mean, you got to know it. You got to really know what you're doing. And it's also not an easy one from a financing perspective. It's unique.
So one thing, I'll state to you that I didn't know at first, is the income to the land is how the property is valued, right? And when you buy these communities, I mean, you're literally getting financials on the back of a napkin a lot of the times, right? So in the first couple times we bought these communities, it's very hard to tell heads or tails, what these things are doing, right?
Right. They're not submitting P&Ls.
There's granddaddy passed it down to his son, his grandson's got it right now. Oh, I don't know, that guy pays me this guy pays me that, right? So as we've been in the space, we're able to, look at these communities, do research in the area, and kind of figure out what the, market calls for lot rent wise. But the lot rents is, when a bank's looking at one of these communities, is what's the lot rents and what are so just think about it. These homes are, they get a title like a car, right? So when you buy one of these homes, and these homes, I mean, the homes that we buy are typically anywhere from, $45,000 to $60,000, but you could buy a home for $200,000, $300,000. They come with a title. You register at a DMV. You pay your if you're a homeowner, you pay your taxes to DMV every year. Now these older homes, when you buy a community, the communities that we buy, they come with older homes. I mean, 60s homes, 70s homes,
Right.
80s
You don't know
homes.
who owns them.
Some of these homes from the 70s, if a person takes care of it, I mean, they look and last, right? But there's no value to them at a certain period of time, right? So when if you own these homes that are 1970s and then you're getting rents, the value is a lot less from a bank's point of view or from an investor's point of view, right? So we transition, these individuals out on these homes that have been paying rent. We help them fix these homes up if they can't afford it. And we work with them on getting these homes to community standards, and they start paying lot rent, and that's typically how it goes down.
Where do you guys typically look? I mean, do you just buy anything that makes sense, or you stay in a specific area so you can manage it better?
I think you said Sunbelt typically, right?
So we kind of started. So my first experience was really down in the Southeast, and we kind of just branched off of that. We've kind of expanded that region, but when we find an area that we like, a market that we like, we'll try to cluster because it just makes more sense operationally, and you could get some economies of scale. We have specific criteria when we look. So we'll make sure it checks the boxes, right? So, it's not just a straight, because we're value add investors, it's just, it's not just a straight cap rate buy. We're also looking at the basis. We're looking at where we believe that we'll be able to take values over time inside that market and try to build out from there to see the value for us to enter into a market or to acquire a community. And sometimes that means passing on some deals that might make sense to somebody else, and that's fine. But we make sure it hits our underwriting criteria, that we know that, hey, we're going to be able to make an impact. We're going to be able to move it to market and create those returns and create real value in the communities that we acquire.
I have a question about, these culture clashes, because I imagine you two guys, New York Italian guys, driving 17 hours down to Alabama and Georgia. And when you show up, I'm imagining a little bit like my cousin Vinny. And
What it's like.
Yeah. And, they're looking at you like you're crazy, and you're looking at them like they're crazy. How does that, relationship work?
Like, how do you make sure that you show up to these
the states that we're in, or we started in, and we're in still, is Alabama and Georgia, now North Carolina. And we started about 8 years ago. And we started, and everybody thought we were crazy going to these areas. Just, it was so far. It was just, I don't know anybody who's ever invested in Alabama.
Yeah.
Yes, you're 100% right. I mean, we stick out like sore thumbs, but we've met a lot of good friends and a lot of good partners in these areas, and people have gotten to know us, and we do very well in these areas. But I will say, over the last 8 years, I mean, you go down to these areas between Florida and New York, which is where we are. I mean, people are pouring in from up here. So it's, I have friends in these areas now that are from New York, New Jersey. Oh, you're from New York. I'm from New York. 8 years ago and today, two totally different animals. I mean, we still stick out like sore thumbs. And I think the biggest culture shock for these communities, people who live in these communities, is us.
Yeah.
When we get there.
Yeah, I'm just trying. How does the respect work? I mean, are they afraid of you? Are they welcoming you? Are they intimidated by you, or are you intimidated by them?
Listen, I don't think you can't walk into this space being intimidated, right? So I think that if you walk into one of these communities and you're intimidated, you're going to lose day one, right? So, Eric had really the smartest idea when we first started going down there. We would only show up in a suburban Denali. Like, we were not going to show up in a Ford Focus, right? And try to, because you're going. So
Dom, when I tell you, when we're driving in these communities or in these areas, I mean, people would look into the car from like 100 yards away, and they would be like, "These guys are not from there." So there was a lot of that, and yes, I mean, it was intimidating to us as well. I mean, but all in all, a lot of good people down south, and I think very welcoming, if you ask me. And a lot of these cities that we're in are very appreciative. We're typically taking a community that's been sitting there and been
rotting away,
and we come in, we pick it up, and we do it respectfully. We make friends, with law enforcement and fire departments and community officials, and anything we need. I mean, it's not like doing business here, Dom. I mean, I called the health department. The top dog at the health department answered the phone. Eric, what's going on? And that's like that.
It's just like New York.
Throughout, just like New York, exactly. So it's just a breath of, in general, it's a breath of fresh air. If you want to compare it to what we're used to doing here, I mean, I'll tell a quick story. I wasn't there for the trip, but we bought a community in Alabama. We still have this community. It's on 231, which goes from Alabama straight into Florida, about 2 hours out of Florida, and we own 15 acres on one side of the highway, another 60 something acres on the other side of the highway, and it just didn't make sense. There was 8 homes or 10 homes on one side of the highway, and we had this whole space on the other side. We moved the homes across, and we wanted to rezone it commercial, and we did. I didn't make it down there for that trip, but I remember preparing for the trip with Frank. I mean, Frank had his 3-piece suit on. He went down there with like a rolling filing cabinet. It was like this big. And like he's
thinking like I'm going to the BSA.
He went in there with an attorney. Like, I'm waiting for the call. And he's like, we're approved. And apparently there were 5 guys in a room. And they never seen anybody dressed like Frank, and that was a done deal.
It was
wow.
But it's just
You guys got approved.
We got approved. That meeting, I fully expected to be, whether it was going to be opposition or and everybody was like, "Wow, that's great!" Boom, boom, boom. Yes, yes, yes. Sent it over, and within 60 days, we had an approval on turning 15 acres from residential to commercial. Which,
wow.
if I had to do that here. Or in New York, how long that would take, even if it was made the most sense in the world.
Years.
And they looked at it like, wow, we really wanted this to be highway commercial. We're glad that you're doing it. And
I love that when you hear that, because they actually welcome the investment.
They welcomed it. They were like, this is exactly what we had in mind, and we're glad that you're taking the initiative.
I love when I hear these stories. I have a client even that bought upstate because he's a big hunter, and he just started looking at houses for investment. And I remember there was like some single families that he thought would be better as 2 families. He's like, so I went to the building department and I was like, listen, I really would like to turn these into 2 families. What would I need to do? Or, do I have to get an architect? He's like, I mean, probably need 2 doors, right? And he's like, and that was it. Like they were like, add a door, and that's
unbelievable.
So there are so many of these situations like that we could speak about. The traveling, something that we have overcame, and people that leave New York investing, typically they'll go to the surrounding areas. They'll go to Jersey, they'll go to PA, somewhere that they could get to in a couple hours. I mean, we're flying into Birmingham on Tuesday. We're going to go down Tuesday morning. We're visiting a manufacturer to buy some new homes. We're flying out the next day. Atlanta is typically our landing spot. It's an 1.5-hour flight. It's really not that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
And we do it quite frequently. And, now that we're, kind of established, I mean, for the first 6 months to a year of a project, we're there regularly. And then after that, we usually, find the team, and, we still visit it, or we'll have a regional manager visit it regularly. And, it works.
So I think it's indisputable that this is a space that's going to continue to grow. I think that there's clearly a housing crisis across the country. There's just major issues from an affordable housing standpoint. So believe in everything you guys are doing. So if somebody wants to invest, what do? They go to your website. How do they participate?
They could absolutely take a look at our website, and they'll get an idea a little bit more about us, our history, what we're about. And listen, we do look for capital partners or look for new capital partners if they want to sit down, and we'd love to have a conversation if people are looking to learn more about that space. We just had a conversation recently and with somebody who's a community owner. Sometimes those become people who we end up doing business with as well. If they don't have the ability to execute on their plan or the capital to get their vision through. I mean, so that's another opportunity. But I would go to our website, which is stonecapinv.com. And then they could just put in a request, and we'd be happy to talk with them.
I got to hear a story.
Yeah, some stories.
I got to hear it, because you guys have been inviting me down, for one of these rides to check it out. There's got to be some culture class.
So I'm going to tell this one about. Right? So Eric, we had this in that same park that we were talking about, which was just, Eric thought it was like the worst thing we ever bought. Right? It was a nightmare. In front of the park, there was. He wasn't even a tenant. He was a squatter, and we just called him Tattoo Face because he had tattoos on half of his face. And he essentially was the drug dealer, right? And he would get out of his car and he'd go to, 5 houses in the community and sell drugs. I mean, that was his job, right? So he was the first person that we went to evict, right? We have to get rid of him. Like, he's got to go.
He rode around on a Pee Wee Herman style bike with handlebars like this through the park, 2 miles an hour in Georgia, in a black leather jacket in the heat.
Yeah.
and literally 2 miles an hour, making birdie noises when we show up, to let everybody know. You can continue.
So we developed a relationship with law enforcement.
The one thing is the visuals that people don't get to experience. Like, these stories sound good. If you were able to see the visuals, and I think that's where the culture comparison with us and being down there, it is, and everybody's, I can't even tell you how many people want to film a reality show. It's just the culture comparison, I think, is the biggest thing that's interesting. So you got to get a good visual.
So 90 degrees on a Pee Wee Herman bike, black leather jacket, making bird sounds, running around the community, letting everybody know you're there.
Selling drugs, right? So we evict him. We evict him, and we evict this prostitute that's in the back. We evict her too. Now, we fly in, it's November, right? We fly in, and we get a call from one of the residents, which is how we knew we turned this community around. Now the residents were calling us before they were calling, like, talking to him. So now we were the point of influence. They call us 8 o'clock in the morning. Hey, Tattoo Face is in one of the homes. Which home? I don't know. Okay. So Eric gets on the phone, calls the sheriff. Sheriff says, call us when you're 20 minutes away. We'll meet you down there. And this was kind of like in the border of two communities.
So 3 different police departments.
Before we get there, right? Before we get
Show
there.
up.
No, hold on. Before we get there, right?
Raining
so
out.
now we're driving, and Eric's like, we got to go there with something because we're going to get there before the cops. I'm like, go there something. Like, what are we going there with? We just got off a plane. Like, I don't got anything on me. He goes, stop here at the Dollar General, right? So we stop at the Dollar General. So now he's in there. He comes back out.
They had nothing.
Well,
They had no
it's not-
baseball bats. Usually they, you sell mace in these areas.
Right.
Something.
He comes out with 2 shower rods.
Listen to me. They were steel shower rods. and
shower
I thought
rods.
I was getting 1, but they happened to be 2.
So
I
now
had
I'm like,
2 shower rods.
what are we going to do with a shower rod? He goes, no, watch. They opens it up. I'm like, all right. I don't know. I don't know what to say. All right. So we get to the park, and the police aren't there yet, right? So now we're going through these vacant homes, like,
Looking for Tattoo Face.
We're looking for Tattoo
with shower
Face
rods.
with shower rods in our hands
And gloves. I bought
And
gloves.
gloves. Just because when you have shower rods, you need a glove. So,
Anyway, 5 cop cars show up.
right?
From 3 different police departments because it was like on the border. So this guy apparently called everybody. They show up, guns drawn. Kid you not.
And we have shower rods.
Guns drawn, banging on the door. Tenants of the home come out. They sit them down. Literally enter the home. They fly out. One flies this way, one flies that way. And they got him. There was a little bit of a chase. It was kind of like a Cops episode. I thought I was in a Cops episode. It was
And you got Tattoo Face.
And they got Tattoo Face. He had a trespass warrant, couldn't come back again. They dropped him off like 5 miles from the park, never showed up again.
Nice.
And the prostitute got arrested.
and that was the end of Tattoo Face.
Yeah.
All right, good.
That was the end of Tattoo Face.
You have one, Eric?
I mean, listen, that kind of took the cake. I mean, there's just so many of them. We just started marketing ourselves. I mean, we've done 0 marketing up until the last, year, just to kind of talk about what we do. I still find it interesting, and when I talk to people, they find it interesting because it's different. So, in marketing this, I mean, these stories are great, but one thing that we're trying to focus on is do some visual marketing on site, show people, what we're doing. I mean, when you see what we're doing, it's just a totally different experience, and that's why we always invite people down. I mean, we've had a handful of people come down, and they come back with stories, and it's good old fun.
And it's
great.
So it's all funny, good stories, but the reality is you're changing communities, you're changing people's lives, and you're making money doing it, which is a really great story.
This was a great episode, man.
Yeah,
Definitely
appreciate you
learned
guys
about-
coming in. This
Thank
was
you for
awesome.
having us.
Yeah, man. Talk to
Thank
you
you.
guys soon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.